Welcome to Impact Video. The year is 332 BCE. The world stands on the precipice of a new era, an age to be forged by the ambition of one man, Alexander the Great. Fresh from his decisive victories over the Persian king Darius III at the Granicus and Issus, and the brutal 7-month siege of Tyre, Alexander's military genius was already the stuff of legend. His gaze now turned south, towards the oldest and wealthiest prize in the ancient world, the land of the pharaohs, Egypt. What took place was not merely a conquest but a profound political and cultural realignment. To understand why, we must first look at the Egypt Alexander was about to enter. For nearly 2 centuries, with some interruptions, Egypt had been under the thumb of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. This was not a happy union. The Persian rulers, seen as foreign occupiers, had a history of imposing heavy taxes, and, most offensively, showing contempt for Egypt's ancient and deeply held religious traditions. Stories of Persian kings desecrating sacred sites and mocking Egyptian gods were widespread, fueling a deep-seated resentment among the populace. The Persian satrap, or governor, Mazaxes, knew his position was precarious. His best forces had been lost with Darius at the Battle of Issus, leaving him with a depleted garrison and a population on the verge of rebellion. He was trapped between the approaching Macedonian army and the simmering hatred of the people he governed. And so, in the autumn of 332 BCE, Alexander the Great marched his formidable army into Egypt. He didn't have to fight a single major battle. Upon reaching the border fortress of Pelusium, the Persian garrison surrendered without a fight. As Alexander advanced along the Nile towards the ancient capital of Memphis, a remarkable thing happened. Instead of shuttered windows and fearful silence, he was met with jubilant crowds. The Egyptians saw him not as another foreign conqueror, but as a divine instrument of liberation. He was the enemy of their hated Persian oppressors, and for that, he was a hero. Alexander, a master of politics as much as warfare, understood the power of this moment. He wasn't there to simply plunder Egypt. He was there to possess it, to make it a cornerstone of his new world order. In Memphis, he made a series of brilliant political moves. He offered sacrifices to the Egyptian gods, most notably the sacred Apis bull, an act of piety that stood in stark contrast to the sacrilege of past Persian rulers. In a lavish ceremony, he allowed himself to be crowned with the traditional double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, formally recognized as Pharaoh, the legitimate successor to a line of kings stretching back millennia. By embracing local customs and presenting himself as a respectful ruler, he won the hearts of the Egyptian priesthood and nobility, securing his authority without spilling a drop of blood. But Alexander's vision extended far beyond the present. Marching to the Mediterranean coast, he identified a unique strip of land between the sea and Lake Mareotis. Here, he ordered the foundation of a new city, one that would bear his name for eternity, Alexandria. Its location was a stroke of strategic genius, blessed with a natural harbor and access to the Nile, perfectly positioned to become the commercial and cultural crossroads of his empire. He personally laid out the city's grid plan, and legend says that when his architects ran out of chalk, he used barley flour to mark the streets, a sign his seers interpreted as a promise of the city's future prosperity, feeding the world. It was a city destined for greatness, a future hub of learning, commerce, and culture unlike any the world had ever seen. With his rule in Egypt secured, Alexander embarked on one of the most enigmatic journeys of his life. He led a small contingent on a perilous, 300-mile trek across the Libyan desert to the remote Siwa oasis. His goal, to consult the famed oracle of the god Amun, whom the Greeks identified with their own king of the gods, Zeus. After days facing the dangers of the desert, he arrived. What happened inside the inner sanctum of the temple is a mystery, as Alexander never fully revealed it, but when he emerged, the high priest had greeted him not as a mortal, but as the son of Zeus-Ammon. This divine affirmation solidified his legitimacy as pharaoh, and broadcast a powerful message across the ancient world. Alexander was no mere king. He was a god-man, destined to rule. One must consider the alternative. What if Alexander, in his haste to pursue Darius, had bypassed Egypt? A hostile Egypt at his back, controlled by the Persian navy, would have been a strategic nightmare, capable of severing his supply lines and fomenting rebellion in Greece. His entire campaign could have unraveled. The decision to secure Egypt was not a detour, it was the linchpin of his entire strategy. Alexander would soon leave Egypt, never to return, but his actions there set in motion 300 years of history. His conquest seamlessly integrated the ancient land of the pharaohs into the new, vibrant Hellenistic world. After his death, his general Ptolemy took control, establishing the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of Greek pharaohs who ruled from the magnificent city of Alexandria. This dynasty, a direct legacy of Alexander's brief visit, would end centuries later with its most famous and final ruler, Cleopatra VII, bringing the age of the pharaohs to a close and ushering in the era of Rome. Impact on the region. Alexander's arrival in Egypt was more than a conquest, it was the catalyst for a transformation that would echo for centuries. He didn't just conquer the ancient kingdom, he set in motion a cultural and intellectual revolution, thrusting a 3,000-year-old civilization into a new interconnected Hellenistic age. This began with a masterful act of cultural diplomacy. By having himself declared the son of the god Amun, Alexander wove his identity into the fabric of Egyptian religion. This syncretism, the blending of beliefs, became the cornerstone of the new era. His successors, the Ptolemies, built upon this by creating the god Serapis, a deity combining the Egyptian Osiris with Greek gods like Zeus. It was a brilliant political move, designed to unify a diverse population under a single Hellenistic rule. This fusion was visible everywhere. In art, formal Egyptian sculpture began to incorporate the naturalism of Greek styles, seen in the famous Fayum mummy portraits. In architecture, grand temples like Edfu were built in the classic pharaonic style, yet bore Greek inscriptions. Governance, too, was a hybrid. A Greek-speaking elite administered the country, imposing their language and laws while preserving the ancient Egyptian systems of agriculture and taxation that made the land so wealthy. The ultimate symbol of this new Egypt was Alexandria. Positioned perfectly at the mouth of the Nile, it quickly became the vibrant heart of the Hellenistic world. Its harbors buzzed with ships carrying out Egypt's immense grain surplus, the bread that would feed the Mediterranean. Alexandria wasn't just a hub for trade, it became the undisputed center of science, philosophy, and culture. At the heart of this intellectual explosion was the legendary Great Library. Part of a larger research institute called the Mushin, it was the world's first true university. The Ptolemies, driven by an ambition to possess all human knowledge, funded scholars and scientists. Here, Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy. Here, Euclid wrote his Elements, the foundational text of geometry. The library was a beacon of human intellect, a testament to knowledge as an empire's greatest treasure. But this golden age came at a cost. Alexander's conquest marked the end of Egypt's long history as an independent kingdom. For 3 centuries it was governed by the Greek Ptolemaic dynasty, its fate increasingly entangled with the turbulent politics of the Mediterranean, culminating in its absorption by the Roman Empire after Cleopatra's death. One can only wonder, what if Alexander had lived to rule from Alexandria? Could this Greco-Egyptian powerhouse have forged a different destiny, forever altering the course of Western civilization? History is not a straight line. A single decision can divert its course forever. Alexander the Great's arrival in Egypt in 332 BC was one such pivotal moment. But what if history had flowed differently? Let's explore the most tantalizing what-if scenarios surrounding Alexander's Egyptian legacy. First, what if Alexander never conquered Egypt? Imagine if he had bypassed the Nile altogether. Egypt would have remained under Persian rule. But Egyptian resentment of heavy taxation and religious insensitivity was a simmering volcano. Without Alexander's liberation, native rebellions would likely have erupted, perhaps leading to a short-lived independent dynasty. However, this reborn kingdom would be vulnerable, a tempting prize for other rising powers like Carthage or Rome. The grand project of Hellenization would be stillborn in Africa, and the intellectual fusion that defined the next 3 centuries would be replaced by a far more isolated future for the land of the pharaohs. Second, what if Alexander had been resisted instead of welcomed? In our history, Egyptians hailed him as a liberator. But what if they had resisted? A protracted war along the Nile would have been a strategic nightmare for Alexander, costing him time, resources, and momentum. A delay of even 6 months could have given the Persian king Darius III the breathing room he desperately needed to rally his vast armies. The decisive Battle of Gaugamela might have been fought by a depleted Macedonian force against a re-energized Persian host. Alexander's empire might have been stopped in its tracks, confined to the eastern Mediterranean. A powerful kingdom, but not the world-spanning legend we know. Third, what if Alexandria had never been founded? Alexander's decision was an act of profound foresight. But what if he had simply moved on? The consequences would have been catastrophic for human knowledge. Without Alexandria, there is no great library. The intellectual center of the Hellenistic world would lack the royal patronage and multicultural dynamism that made it a super collider for ideas. Eratosthenes might never have had the resources to calculate the circumference of the Earth. The city was also the linchpin connecting Mediterranean trade with the East. Without it, global commerce would be slower and the ancient world a poorer, less connected and intellectually dimmer place. Fourth, what if the Egyptians rejected Greek culture? The Ptolemies skillfully blended Greek and Egyptian customs to legitimize their rule, creating hybrid gods like Serapis. But what if this effort had failed? What if the Egyptian priesthood had organized a sustained campaign of cultural resistance? The Ptolemaic dynasty would have been built on a foundation of sand, turning Egypt into a powder keg of tension. Rulers would be forced to govern by brute force, leading to constant uprisings. The vibrant Greco-Egyptian culture would be erased, and the kingdom would be weaker and more divided. The Ptolemaic dynasty might not have lasted 300 years, consumed by the internal cultural war they failed to prevent. Fifth, what if Alexander lived longer and made Egypt his capital? Alexander died in Babylon. But what if he had survived and declared Alexandria the capital of his world empire? The political and economic heart of the known world would shift to Egypt, not Babylon or a still minor Rome. All roads would lead to Alexandria. Ruling from Egypt, Alexander would have consolidated his power, perhaps even campaigning against Carthage or the Italian peninsula. The Roman Republic, instead of rising to dominate, might have become a vassal to a dominant Alexandrian empire. The language of power would remain Greek, not Latin, and the trajectory of Western civilization would be fundamentally recentered from Europe to North Africa. Finally, what if Cleopatra had won at Actium? In 31 BC, her fleet faced Octavian in a battle for the soul of Rome. History records a disastrous defeat, but what if they had won? A victory would have shattered Octavian's ambitions, allowing Antony and Cleopatra to create a rival Roman Hellenistic empire in the east, with Alexandria as its capital. The Roman world would have been split, a Latin West versus a Greek East. The brilliant Cleopatra would have secured her dynasty's future, and this Eastern empire could have become the dominant world force. These alternate histories show us that the world we know was never guaranteed. It was forged in moments of conquest, vision, and chance on the banks of the Nile. Thanking viewers for running in and to return for future content, as well as leaving a comment for future content.